Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while since my last video, but we finally have some progress going on with the GTR that I gotta get you updated on. So let's take a look. Now, not a lot has actually changed on the car since the last video. Now, there was a question about my fuel pumps, whether I was going to be running the secondary pump all the time or if I was going to stage it somehow. So when I turned the electricity back on the car, I did have everything connected together because, well, I wanted to hear if both pumps were turning on and priming and also check for leaks and stuff like that. So now that everything has been situated, I know there's no leaks, everything is working correctly, I went ahead and hooked up the secondary pump to the AC out on the ECU because, well, I'm not running any AC, and that's an available ground signal coming out of the ECU that I could use to trigger the relay. So I'll kind of show you how I set that up in the Link ECU. Obviously, when we get to start tuning, my tuner may change the parameters and some of the logic as far as, you know, when does it turn on and how and why. But as far as just demonstrating how it's staged, I'll go ahead and show you that today. But the biggest thing for today is that the car's finally leaving this garage, right? So it's been over a year since I parked the car and started this whole project. So now it's gonna head off to my buddy Rob's shop. He's gonna be fabbing up the titanium intercooler pipes as well as the downpipe, the dump tube for the wastegate, and getting the fittings all welded on for the bypass valve and stuff like that. So big progress finally, because now this means once that's done, I could finally start the car, right? I could do the initial break-in and the oil change and get it ready for the dyno. All right, so let's jump in the car. We'll take a look at the fuel system, and then we'll cover a little bit of loading the car and talk about what's going to happen. All right, so let's take a look at how the fuel pumps are set up. So I went ahead and connected the laptop to the USB cable going to the ECU. So we'll go ahead and turn on power to the car here, and we will launch PC Link. Now the software is open. We'll go ahead and connect to the ECU. All right, ECU connected. And then we'll jump into the ECU settings over here, and we're going to be taking a look at our auxiliary outputs. Okay, so if I open up this list, you can see aux 1 and 2 is for the fuel pump control. Aux 3 was originally the AC out, so it controlled the clutch fan. So I went ahead and repurposed that as the second fuel pump, and it is for, or it's set up as a GP output, so like a general purpose output. And I added a couple of different logic functions in here. Now these are just kind of arbitrary. Obviously my tuner may change these, but I have it set for, you know, aux value has to be on, so the fuel pump, the first fuel pump has to be on for the second one to turn on. The second one will turn on as long as I'm above 3,500 RPM and I'm building at least 10 pounds of boost. So again, this is all arbitrary, just kind of messing with the settings myself. The tuner may decide to change that, okay? If I jump back over here to aux 6, this is the original output for the stock fuel pump. Okay, so this is still driving pump number 1, and then aux 3 is driving pump number 2. All right, so we could go ahead and test these functions. If we go up here to the function, instead of GP output, I could go ahead and select test on. Okay, now notice if I select test on, nothing happens, right? I don't hear anything. Okay, so let me go ahead and switch that back to the GP output for the second pump, and it's because the way that I have it hooked up, fuel pump number 1 has to be on, kind of a fail-safe, has to be on for the second one to turn on. Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn the test on for the first fuel pump, and you'll be able to hear that. All right, so we can hear fuel running through the lines right there from the first pump. Now I could jump back over here to the second pump, and if we turn this on, now you can hear both pumps running. All right, so it's kind of a cool function. Go ahead and turn them on to make sure that everything's wired correctly. So we'll go ahead and turn this back to our GP output, and we'll go over here to aux 6, and we'll change this back to fuel pump. And now they turned off. All right, so a good way to just make sure that everything is working correctly. So you can see that I have my second pump staged to turn on again after the first pump is already on, and we'll set up some logic functions to make sure it turns on at the right time. But yeah, went ahead and removed the hood, got the bumper off, everything getting ready to be loaded up into the trailer. So my buddy should be back up here in a couple hours, and we'll get you updated. So we're gonna go actually meet Rob off of the freeway. He is actually dropping off another car for a customer He finished a Porsche build. It's actually going to be an RWB Porsche, but he built the whole titanium exhaust for that. So we'll actually get to see that being unloaded and maybe hear some sound clips of that. So let's go take a ride down the back road, shall we? Alright guys, so Rob actually just got here, but I guess the owner of the Porsche is running a little bit behind, so we'll go ahead and open the trailer, take a peek at the car, and catch up for a bit. So guys, Porsche has been unloaded, driver took delivery, and man, that thing sounds amazing. Unfortunately, the rear bumper is on it, obviously, because he's going to be driving it home, but just to see all the piping that's behind the bumper, once he does the full RWB build, I really hope that they choose to kind of leave some features open in the rear bumper so you can really see the piping, because it's nothing but artwork. So now we're going to be heading back to the house, get the GTR all loaded up, and yeah, we'll call this video a wrap. Are you sick of waiting? I know it's been a bit. It's been actually since November 2nd, and it is now February 16th. So pretty much 3.5 months since my car went off to Rob's shop down at RK Titanium. So she is back, and oh, by far, she better than ever. And we're gonna get into that in just a second. But not only is all the titanium parts buttoned up, but she runs, she drives. There's no major issues, no major leaks. We'll get into a couple little findings and details. I mean, it's a fresh build, so obviously there's going to be some little things to address, but we'll get into that as well. And I'll kind of fill you in on what has happened over the past 3.5 months. But first, I know you guys have been waiting. Let's take a look at this finished engine bay. Taking a look at this absolute artwork of fabrication, you can see we did the hot and cold side for the intercooler piping. We did the upper radiator pipe, as well as the downpipe and the dump tube for the wastegate. You can see that Rob fabbed up a heat shield for the exhaust side valve cover, which really brings out some colors, and we'll get to coloring here in just a second. And also some radiator stays, which tie in the front end as well. Looking at the pipes themselves, Rob knows I absolutely love pie cuts, and he went just absolutely ham. And everything except for the straight section, the lower part of the downpipe, which is straight, everything else is all pie cuts. And just absolutely killed it on design, weld, presentation, coloring. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better. And taking a look at the coloring, he chose to keep everything, the blue and the purple, slight hues of the gold here and there, but for the most part, it just completely plays with the midnight purple of the car and the powder-coated parts on the engine, and just nothing's too overkill. It just really allows everything to just kind of play off of each other, which I told him I kind of wanted to keep it minimal. I didn't want to go too overkill. I know that you could kind of go way too far with titanium way too quick, and although it's a wow presentation wise, I wanted to keep this engine bay a little bit more simple, but just let all the colors kind of stand out on their own. So really excited how they came out. We chose to keep the downpipe non-colored because as the car runs, the pipe itself is naturally going to color, and it's going to kind of add a completely different element of coloring to the engine bay as well. And it'll really tie in well with the heat shield that he created. So can't wait to get some miles on it and start to see some color pop out on that downpipe. Well, guys, what do you think? Pretty badass, right? I'm absolutely blown away with how all this has come together. It just exceeded all expectations and dreams for what I thought this build was even going to be. So, huge shout out to Rob at RK Titanium. Thank you so much for the attention to detail and the quality of work on this project. The engine bay just looks completely tied together now with those pipes in there, and it truly is the icing on the cake. So again, thank you very much. If you guys want to check out his work, head to rktitanium.com. Check him out on Facebook, Instagram. I'll go ahead and put the links to those down below inside the video description. So now let's get you caught up on what's been going on for the past 3.5 months. So we saw the car go down to Rob's shop on November 2nd, right? That's when they came and picked it up. His shop is about 2.5 hours on a good day south from here. So when we were initially talking about timelines, we figured we'd probably get it done hopefully the weekend before Thanksgiving, right? Because I had some vacation time scheduled around there. It'd be good for going back and forth. And not only do we have to tow it up, but I had to go down there and do all the final button-up details and triple checks and fluids and whatnot to actually start it. Because as you've seen, my driveway is not flat, and it's not friendly for an immobile car. So it had to come up here on its own power. So there's, some urgency that it had to run and drive. But yeah, like everything, Murphy's Law came into play, and November turned into December, and Christmas went by, and New Year's, and I told him, like, there's no rush on it. If you have customer cars, take care of customer cars, right? During the winter, we can't even get my car up here anyways, so don't even worry about it, right? I'd rather have you take your time and do it right than rush it just so it could be back in my garage. Makes no sense. So it was probably, mid-January. And he was just finishing up the last pieces, and we organized a weekend that I could go down there. And I work a 980 schedule, so I have every other Friday off. So we set it up to where I could go down there on a Thursday after work, because I already work south of Seattle, so it's just another hour or so drive for me to get to his house. So I figured go down there on a Thursday. We'd have Thursday night and Friday to button it up, get it running, get it on the trailer, bring it back up here and get it in the garage. Because Saturday, we had family on my wife's side coming over to our house. So really, I just had Thursday, Friday. So had to get done, right? So get down there on a Thursday, and a couple things that I had to do was install the wideband sensor, right? That hadn't been done yet because we didn't have the downpipe on, so I didn't have a bung to put the sensor in. So that was one of the main things. I had to set the fuel pressure, do all the final little checks on the ECU and make sure there's no leaks, and obviously make sure fluids are full and no vacuum leaks and everything's tight, and drivetrains on and everything on the wheels and all that. Everything's tight, right? Because it's going to be driving. I have to drive it up the street, up my driveway and into the garage. I didn't want something to break and now I'm stuck in the middle of the street on a freaking hill that's already tough enough to drive up on a good day. So yeah, start getting into it, and I installed the wideband, and for some reason the ECU wouldn't recognize it. I couldn't configure it. So I sit there and I go back through all the wiring again, double check it, get out the multimeter, and we're checking voltage at the sensor, voltage at the little module, the lambda module, and everything has power. Everything should be functioning correctly, but it just won't recognize it for whatever reason. So after dicking around with it for too long and wasting too much time, I figured, well, I could still start the car without the sensor in, right? So that kind of got dropped down the priority list. So now I moved to fuel pressure. Turn on the pumps, or the first pump, and I come over and I look at the gauge, and it's only reading like 20 psi. I'm like, oh, okay, so adjust the screw and nothing's happening. Back the screw out, nothing changes. Screw it all the way down, nothing changes. So now I'm like, is my fuel pressure regulator not working? Right? So I turn on the second pump and the pressure goes up to like 40-ish, right? And like typically, like one pump should be plenty of pressure. I mean, even though running like a -8 line, it should still have plenty of oomph to pressurize the lines, right? At least for 43 psi for idle. So I'm trying to figure out what the F is going on. So now I take apart the fuel pressure regulator, wondering if maybe the diaphragm like has a hole in it, or it wasn't put together correctly, or for whatever reason, but nothing's wrong with it, right? So I put that back together, assemble everything, prime the pumps again, and still like 20 psi like on one pump. So now I go look at the fuel tank side, and I noticed that the epoxy that I used, like it never really cured. Like I totally used the wrong stuff. Excuse me. So yeah, totally used the wrong stuff. Do not use whatever it is that I showed you to use. I ended up using marine weld. And if you've watched Godzilla, he uses the marine weld from JB Weld also. That is what you want to use. I don't know why I didn't get that from the start. I don't know. So use that. So I spent part of the evening grinding away all the other epoxy and taking apart the bulkhead fittings and resealing everything. And so I noticed that on the fuel tank side, that the fittings weren't really completely engaging with the bulkhead fittings that I had on the fuel hat. Right? There's threads exposed, but not really a lot. So under pressure, fuel was coming past the threads and starting to just like erode at the epoxy that I used. So anyways, so that's why it was disintegrating, and like fuel was kind of collecting on top of the top hat. So I thought, okay, well maybe that's where my pressure loss is coming from. So I take it back. I didn't use marine weld just yet. We went to AutoZone or whatever was by his house, and they didn't have any. So I got like weld stick. It said like it was safe for fuel and petroleum, and I figured I need something to seal this up tonight because I got to start the goddamn thing. All right, so I used the weld stick, and anyway, so I resealed the fuel hat, and let that sit overnight. We brought it in the house. So it was nice and warm and cured overnight. So anyways, Thursday night was like pretty much a wash. Like between the wideband sensor and screwing around with the fuel hat, that pretty much killed most of the free time. And then we went out with some teammates and friends for dinner and some beers, and then came back, kind of worked on it a little bit more, but you know, took care of fluids and any other like little thing I could do that didn't really require a lot of attention and effort, just like double checks, triple checks, going around, checking bolts, hardware, all that. Took care of Saturday or Thursday night. So that way Friday, I could go ahead and really make sure the fuel issue was taken care of and start it, right? So fast forward, now it's Friday. So I start reassembling the fuel hat, get everything back together, all the wiring and everything everything's all sealed up. Prime it a couple of times. Oop, I don't see any leaks. Looks like we have a good seal. Cool. Come over to the rail side and still like 20 PSI. So I'm like, what the crap is going on? And at one point, right, we're kind of going back and forth, and we thought like, oh, well, maybe it's the gauge, right? So we're swapping out the gauge, and then we're looking, maybe we could change out to an FPR that Rob had sitting down in his shop, but we're trying to figure out how can we plumb that in. And then one time I go and I turn my key and nothing happens, right? The power's dead. But I didn't know the power. At first it just didn't register. And because for the most part, like I keep my battery on like a battery tender when it's in the garage. But there's probably a period of time before it went down to his shop where it wasn't plugged in. And then the 3.5 months at his shop, it just sat there, right? So it didn't have the battery tender plugged in also. So the battery was freaking dead. So we put it on his charger. He has like a high amp charger. And while we're sitting there waiting for it to charge, right, I'm kind of just taking care of other little things and, you know, going through PC Link and making sure like the dead time or the dead times for the injector table was done, and just little minutia details that I could while I'm waiting for the battery to charge. So I set it up on PC Link where both pumps were on, because I knew with both pumps on, I was at least getting 40 PSI, so I could start it. Didn't have any leaks. So after a couple hours of waiting, it started getting towards like midday, and it was kind of like, we gotta shit or get off the pot. Like, it's getting late. We either gotta get this thing running and cycled and towed up to my house back up north, or call it and put it back on the lift in the corner of the shop, and I come back another weekend to try and wrap it up. All right, so we finally start to get a charge. I'm doing all my checks. Everything looks good. And dude, oh my God, turning the key for the first time, there was just so much anxiety. I mean, like, just given everything. I mean, it's a big project. So that little motion of turning a key, it's either everything's going to work perfectly or fail catastrophically, right? So fire it up, cranks over, fires up perfectly fine. You know, a little bit of gas at first. I mean, it's running on just like a base map, right? It's not perfectly tuned, so had to adjust the fuel table a little bit. But it was running, idling fine. We did the heat cycle, you know, did the oil change on it, topped off all the fluids. Everything was running good. There's no errors. There's no knock. I mean, very little knock. Obviously, it's fresh build, so a little bit of knock at first. But overall, checked every cylinder. Everything was running nice and healthy. And we loaded up on the in the trailer and took it home, man. And yeah, that was a crazy freaking 2 days or day and a half. But we get back up here and unload it, and I get back in the garage, and for some reason, like, it completely slipped my mind. But when we get it off the trailer, I'm trying to drive it up the hill and get into my driveway, and only rear wheel drive is engaging. I'm like, why am I having issues? Like, why is rear wheel drive engaging? So I thought, well, maybe like a connector on the pump, or like maybe I just had the fuse disconnected for the little switch that I have for the front diff to switch from all wheel to rear wheel. So anyways, it took a couple times of sitting there crab walking my car and just giving it gas, which is, hey, fuck, I broke it in just getting it up the driveway basically. getting it back up and in here, only to find out that when I was bleeding the fluid for the pump, I forgot to disconnect the maintenance connector, so it was stuck in rear-wheel drive. So that was my fault. So now it's back in all-wheel drive mode, running fine. So yeah, so it was crazy. And again, I apologize. I didn't have any GoPro footage of it, but I promise you, we're gonna get this girl started up so you guys could see and hear it run. So now the car's back in the garage. The first thing I did was readdress the fuel hat. Right, so I want to take that apart and really seal it good. So again, I had to chip away all that weld stick that I put on originally, and I did all the marine weld, the JB weld, which really, again, I should have done from the start. It turned out way better, and I've had no issues since. So got that finished up. Also, I ordered longer bulkhead fittings. So the other ones, like I said, like I had some threads sticking out underneath the fuel hat, but these that I had, that I ordered were extra long. So the mating side that had the fuel line attached to it could really engage all the way onto the thread. So kind of like a twofold issue, bad epoxy and the wrong bulkhead fittings from the start. So got those addressed. Also, when I went back into PC Link, I noticed that now my CAN connection was there. So maybe it was just need a power cycle, or I just didn't have enough power in the battery for whatever reason to power the module. Even though we were reading like almost 12 volts, but for whatever reason, after the first start and I drove it, the wideband is there. So, act of God, who knows? But also I noticed that my fuel pressure issues are solved. Because the battery was so low, it didn't have enough amperage to really power the pumps to the PSI necessary. So that's why the pressure on the rail was so low. So now one pump is totally fine. Second pump gives me plenty of pressure. So I went ahead and dialed everything in at 43 PSI off of one pump, and then set up a couple of different controls for the second pump. But again, that's probably all going to change once it gets tuned anyways. So without further ado, let's go start her up. Well, guys, there you have it. She's running. Really appreciate everyone following along since the beginning of this build. Love interacting with you guys, and appreciate all the comments. So next up, I'm going to do a couple more heat cycles just to make sure everything is okay. Again, go over, double check, triple check everything, and then it's going to go off and get some tuning done. So stick around for that, maybe a little bit, but you guys are used to waiting by now, so I'm sure that you'll appreciate it when it finally does happen. But again, as always, hope you guys follow along, like, subscribe, share, and have a good one.